For more on this, we're now joined on the line by Professor Franz Kruger. Thanks very much for joining us this evening, Prof. Your thoughts, you're an academic in the media, and this is what you do for a living, watch media developments. And I'm just wondering, you're sitting chatting to your students, what do you explain to them about the significance of today's judgment?
Thanks, Peter, and good evening. Well, I mean, it's clear that the kind of threats and intimidation that we've seen from various quarters, but in this case particularly from the BLF, is utterly unacceptable. I mean, you ask what one says to students, and one says to students, I think that media freedom is a very precious thing, and that it continues to be under threat, and that we have a duty to defend it in different ways. The point to be made here is that it's not just an attack on a fundamental right that's entrenched in the Constitution. It's not just an attack on the livelihoods and the profession of journalism. It's an attack on the right of ordinary citizens to be informed about what's going on in this country. I mean, I think it's very significant that the defense that is being mounted here or the attack that's being mounted here is on reporters that have exposed corruption. I mean, that, I think, in itself is significant. So one says to students, stick to your guns. It's not an easy place to be, but it is really important to continue defending the precious rights that we have.
One of the dimensions that's coming through this group, the BLF, is they say white judge, white law, and anyone who's black who is not supporting their narrative is an askari, and that these are racist, biased reporting. It seems as if there's a particular agenda that they're pushing through, and I wonder if we're focusing perhaps just on the intimidation of the media, but maybe there's a bigger agenda that's playing out, and that the BLF are actually at the forefront of this.
Well, there have been accusations and suspicions that the BLF is essentially a kind of set of shock troops for the Gupta family and interests associated with them. I mean, I don't know what kind of bigger agenda there may be at stake, but certainly it is significant that this attack is couched so strongly in racial terms. I mean, it becomes a circular and kind of unanswerable logic to some extent that everybody who is against you is either white, or defending white monopoly capital, or then somehow captured by white and white monopoly capital. It makes it possible to write off everybody who disagrees with you in that particular way. I mean, as you say, if blacks who don't agree with them are Askaris, well, it seems to me that this country is very full of Askaris then, because they are a minority group. They don't represent a large section of public opinion, I don't think.
Bell Pottinger this week have apologized for their role, and again, you know, they're given credit for coming up with this term white monopoly capital. Also concerning, because we're seeing the BLF doing this, we're seeing Bell Pottinger talk about white monopoly capital. What does it say about the vulnerability that South Africa is in, that groups can use race as a thing to stoke up the fires, as it were?
I think we have to admit that race continues to be an important topic, an important thing to think about and to debate and to discuss. I mean, the entrenched and inherited advantages of white people, that's a reality that we have to contend with. I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to take refuge in this kind of rhetoric, but it certainly is a reality, and it does touch a nerve in many cases. It offers this kind of narrative in some senses offers a simple explanation for a whole lot of things that people feel very deeply about. So, you know, race is an issue. It is going to continue to be an issue in all sorts of sectors in South Africa. And I think that this narrative that's been developed, in a sense, quite cleverly makes use of that. For political purposes.
The police minister has spoken out against this kind of violence by the BLF movement. What do you think government, maybe even the president, has to do in a situation like this? Because if the BLF continue to do what they're doing, and they promise to, it's not something that we want to see more of.
Well, I think SANEF is quite correct that the courts have now made a ruling. There is an urgent interdict in place against harassment of this kind. And it is incumbent on the police now to actually enforce that interdict and to have a look at what happened today and what continues to be said by the leadership of the BLF to see whether there is a criminal act of some kind that is being committed, and then to take action accordingly. I mean, we are supposed to be living in a country where law and justice prevails, and so it is really up to the authorities to enforce the ruling of the court and protect journalists and others who need to be protected.
How do we tell this story going forward? Because I'm also watching this from a distance, and I wonder if, the BLF is not using the media actually to advance their own cause. They don't really have a constituency. They're a fairly small group, and yet they're making headlines for weeks now.
Well, I think you put your finger on an important issue that I was also thinking about earlier, and that is that, in a sense, this controversy that they have stoked gives them the kind of oxygen of publicity that they were unable to get in other ways. I mean, I don't think we can ignore what's going on, unfortunately, but we do have to be alive to the fact that just the very attention that the BLF is getting in the course of this serves their ends in a very particular way.
All right, Frans Kruger, thank you very much indeed. We're going to leave it there for now. Thanks for sharing your thoughts with us on this very important issue. That's Professor Frans Kruger from Wits University.